Welcome back, everybody, to Pick Up the Pace podcast. You with your man Magic and Anadu. Our next guest was born in Putaruru and is from the Ngāti Raukawa and Waikato Tainui tribes. She attended Putaruru High School and is a multi-talented sportswoman who has represented New Zealand in rugby league, rugby 15s and 7s.
Over 2 decades, she has won 2 Rugby League World Cups, a Rugby 7 World Cup, and a Rugby League 9s World Cup. She is currently contracted to the New Zealand Warriors women's team and has her eyes set on next year's 2021 Rugby World Cup.
In the 2020 New Year's Honours, she was appointed as a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to rugby league and is widely considered as one of New Zealand's greatest ever sportsperson.
Mōkau ki runga, tāmaki ki raro, anga tōtoa ki Wainganui, pare hauraki, pare Waikato, te kaukau roa o Patitere, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to the Pick Up the Pace podcast, Honey Hireme-Smiler.
Kia ora kōrua, and everyone that's listening. So it's awesome to be joining you guys this afternoon.
Thanks, Honey. Great to have you on board today. Hey, you grew up in the small Waikato town of Putaruru. What was it like growing up there as a kid?
Yeah, mate, it was amazing, really, to be honest. You know, small town living. I don't think I'd change it for the world. I come from quite a big whanau, and so if I'm honest, probably half the population of Putaruru was my actual immediate whanau, and probably the other half walked around calling us cousins, or you know how you just call all the locals aunties and uncles. Yeah, that was kind of how Putaruru was. Everyone was your auntie, your uncle, your cousin. So now really good place to grow up in. You know, there wasn't much to do really, but yeah, we just made fun with the small things on offerings, like the rivers were probably our biggest hangout there. Growing up at the river and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it was awesome. Loved it.
Hey, while we've done our research, we found that your full name is actually Aneta Honey Hireme. At what point did you start identifying yourself as Honey, or was it just one of those things where Honey just sort of stuck?
Well, actually, funny story with that. So growing up, Honey just stuck, I think, from a baby. So I always thought I was Honey. And in fact, my dad, his surname's Hunter. So through school, I was actually Honey Hunter. And it was right up until I went to go for my license. I had to obviously provide a birth certificate. And I said to my mum, "Oh, where's my birth certificate?" And she goes, "Oh, here it is." And I read it, and it says that my name legally is Aneta Hireme. And I was like, what the? And I said, "Oh," and I didn't even have a dad on my birth certificate. Actually, I still don't. And I was like, "Oh, I'm like this totally different person. My name is Aneta Hireme." And so I said, "Oh, you know, how do I get my license under Honey Hunter? Because it's my name." And they're like, "Oh, you got to go and change it." And I think back then it was going to cost like $180 or something. And so I said to my dad, "Oh, you got to go pay $180 and change my name." And he was like, "Oh, I'm not paying that, blah, blah, blah," sort of thing. So I had to put my license under Aneta Hireme. So my legal name is Aneta Honey Hireme. So yeah, so I changed it. And then as it sort of all played out, then I'd register, you know, as you started to need documents to like go to tech and even through school and that. So everything started to change under Aneta Hireme, but I was still always Honey. So then, yeah, it's funny because everyone back at school is like, "Honey Hunter? Who's Honey Hireme? Like, we know Honey Hunter," sort of thing. So, but my brothers and sisters are under Hunter, or my brothers and that are. But yeah, I'm sure that's my dad's biggest regret, actually, because now I'm on the world stage and it's got Hireme all over it and not his surname. So yeah, but nah, it's quite a hard case, actually. And the name Aneta is from my grandmother, my great grandmother. So yeah, so but Honey seemed to stick. So it's the only name I've ever known. I used to be embarrassed of it, actually, growing up, but I'm not anymore. Actually, I'm quite proud of it.
Hey, let's talk about your whānau for a bit, Honey. You were part of a tight-knit whānau growing up. What were some of the important values your parents and wider whānau instilled as you and your 3 young brothers?
Yeah, I suppose we were, that was it, probably, was just that whanaungatanga was very important to us. We probably all migrated a lot around our grandparents, so that's on my mum's side, because my mum was one of 11. And all 11 of her siblings all grew up in Putaruru, and so then all of us cousins all grew up. So we almost grew up like brothers and sisters. I suppose in terms of values was always, our family is probably really well known for just serving others, you know, always, if there was a tangi on, our family was the first ones there in the kitchen doing the mahi or going out to get the kai or whatever it was. We were probably growing up on, you know, those values in terms of work ethic, and you know, serving our whānau, serving our community was pretty, I suppose, entrenched in us from our grandparents through to our parents. So it's, you know, I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, from a sporting, I suppose, point of view, we were, you know, that's all we did in Putaruru. You know, all the kids played sport there. I was lucky enough, actually growing up, I had 2 older cousins. So Corey Chase, who was a 100-metre sprinter, you know, all of us cousins, we all looked up to him because he was one of the oldest, and he went away and ran for New Zealand, and, you know, he broke quite a few records through school age. And then pretty much following close after him was my cousin Hayden Hireme, and, you know, he was a top rugby player, played Waikato, played secondary school boys and all of that, and he also did the hurdles in athletics. So I was pretty lucky in that to have sort of role models, I suppose, in my earlier days, through my cousins that were thing. And Corey was our first cousin to get a contract with Adidas, and so they sent him this big pack, and all the cousins just were like swarmed our auntie's house, like, oh, can we have a t-shirt? So that was cool, and we were always quite proud of our cousins and anything that our cousins achieved, really.
Oh, cool. So you're from Ngāti Raukawa and Waikato Tainui. How important is Māoritanga and Māori culture to you?
Yeah, it was always pretty important to us. Growing up, Mum was kaiawhine at the local kohanga reo, which we all went to that kohanga reo. So that's probably my earliest experience with our culture. We spent a lot of time at our marae whenever there was anything on there. So we went out to our marae quite often. And then once we got to primary school, me and my brother and that, we went into the whānau. You know, in anything that was going Māori at school, we went into those. So we were in the whānau unit, and then I think it was in the bilingual unit, come intermediate, and then come high school again. We were in the whānau unit again. So I quite enjoyed learning te reo through school, and I picked it up quite easily. And saying that, you know, sort of going through high school, like I think I was in 3rd form, we sat school C te reo and passed it, and then sat bursary te reo and 5th form and passed that. And then yeah, but the thing with learning the language obviously is you've got to stay in it. And so it was just, you know, once we left school, probably went off and worked for the wānanga, so was still quite immersed, still wasn't fluent. I've never been fluent, but still was immersed around tikanga Māori and te reo Māori, so was able to, you know, still, I suppose, retain it. But then once I sort of started working in mainstream organisations, yeah, just slipped away. And it's something that I know deep down inside of me, you know, one day I know before my time's done, I'd love to be fluent in the reo. It's just a big part of me. I just, you know how you kind of get this feeling that something's calling you. For me, it's knowing my reo through and through. But yeah, I think for us, our grandmother, my mum's mum, she was actually Jehovah's Witness. So we grew up in with that sort of religion, although it wasn't forced on us, and a lot of our parents weren't sort of immersed in it. But I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents growing up, so I got to experience the Jehovah's Witness religion and that, which I think really helped a lot of us cousins. We respected it because it's what my nan believed in, but I think any kind of religion gives you a decent amount of grounding as well. So it was important to us, and I always always respected that religion, just because, you know, we had that played a small part in our life and our upbringing.
Hey, as a child, you mostly played rugby league, playing for the Putaruru Dragons from the age of 5. As a young girl in a small town like Putaruru, what was it like playing most of your footy with and against the boys?
For me, it was quite normal, to be honest, because there was actually quite a few other girls in town that were playing playing league as well. It was, you know, I think sort of from 5 through to about 8 or 9, I didn't really know the difference. I didn't probably realise, I knew that there was more boys in my team than there was girls, but I probably didn't really start to feel a little bit different until probably around 10, 11, 12, when obviously the girls just sort of, you know, then there was only like me and maybe one other girl in the team. And the boys started to get bigger, and I was like, you know, started to realize, oh man, I'm starting to play against, you know, bigger boys now. And it was, you know, it sort of got a bit frightening, but it was quite normal. Like whether, you know, I played with lots of the girls from Putaruru, all my mates from back home, they all played in our teams too. But yeah, just as we got older, you know, that all start to drop off. For me though, I always, I think, you know, you kind of, I don't know what age it was when you kind of realize that you're going okay. And for me, that probably that realization came probably at around about being about 8 or 9, and I was already making the sort of Midland schoolboys teams, and then I went on further and made the Northern Zone teams, and then I realized, oh look, I'm the only girl in this now, you know. So you kind of realize, oh okay, yeah, this is the next level, and this is, you know, this is obviously something that I'm pretty all right at if I'm making these teams, not because I'm a girl, because I'm able to compete with these boys. And also just gauging from the boys too, you know, your typical, oh, you know, oh, you two fellas pick your teams, you know. And when I knew I was getting picked, you know, if the captain of the team was picking me first, I was like, oh yeah, I must be going all right, you know. They're not sort of not picking me because I'm a girl, they're picking me because I must be a decent enough player that they want me on their team first. So yeah, it was, yeah, for me it was normal, eh? But yeah, definitely as I got older, definitely started to realise, oh nah, this is a bit different.
You attended Putaruru High School, and it was there where you got involved in a lot of different sports. During your high school years, you'd been involved in rep sides for both league and union. Can you talk us through your high school years and all the different sports and teams that you were involved in?
Yeah, obviously once I got to high school, I couldn't play in those boys teams anymore, but I probably got in with a really cool group of mates, and we were in a gang, but we were like a sporting gang, you know. We were a group of girls that we were called NFX, which stood for no effing exercise, which was really interesting because we weren't a gang, we were more like a sporting group of friends, and we entered everything. So I don't know why we ever came up with that name. I think it was a tag, you know how you used to have a tag. It was a tag with the letters N, F and X, and then we made it our team name. And so we entered everything that we could. We were in the local basketball, the netball, the touch, you know, everything that we could, we were just entering and playing. And it was funny because then there was kind of a group of boys that again created their own little exercise gang, and so we'd kind of compete with them. And everything, especially in touch and all of that kind of stuff, you know, where you could play boys against girls and that. But it wasn't probably till high school where I actually started rugby. My first game I actually played for Putaruru High School because we didn't have a team. I had to go and play for Putaruru, and I had a year there, and then we decided, oh well, we've got enough to make, I think, a 10-a-side girls team from Putaruru. So then we started playing there, but. Yeah, high school for me was just everything was revolved around sport. You know, like I definitely struggled academically. Sitting in a classroom wasn't my thing, but to sort of, I suppose, balance that out was to enroll in everything sport. Even like you get your athletics day and they say, oh, you have to, you know, sign up to at least 3 events, you know, at least 1 running event and 2 field events or whatever. I signed up to all 10, except the long distance. Never signed up to any of that. But all the running events, all the field events, everything, you know, you just wanted to be involved. And I think it was just who we were, right? We just wanted to do anything and everything that just gave us something to do. And I think the other thing was that the more sports that we signed up to, obviously we got to travel. And a lot of our stuff we did over in Putaruru, you know, they're kind of our closest town. And Putaruru had KFC and McDonald's. So we always knew that, oh yeah, if we go over there, we get to play sport, and we get KFC on the way home, or McDonald's on the way home. So that was always a bit of an incentive too. Was we only had a fish and chip shop in Putaruru, so we always knew, oh yes, we'll go to Toke, we get KFC and McDonald's if we go and play a game or whatever it was. So yeah.
And let's talk about your years immediately after high school. At 17, you were picked for the New Zealand Māori Rugby League, and then when high school finished, you played rugby for the New Zealand Māori Sevens team. This was the only start of your international sporting career. What were some of the highlights playing for these two teams early in your career?
Yeah, so because I couldn't play with the boys, I jumped into women's rugby and rugby league probably from like 14, 15, because back then there was no age limit, so I could just jump in. And I was pretty big back then, actually. So I jumped in quite early, and then, yeah, lucky enough to make those two representative teams at quite a young age. And I think the highlight was, I suppose, initially just hearing my name get called out, and anything that was attached to New Zealand, I was like, yes, you know, that was probably a big one. But also then I was lucky that I had, you know, a few ladies from back home that had helped me, especially with the sevens, because, you know, fitness was never my strength. And so I had a couple of ladies from back home that were really, I suppose, instrumental in helping me make that, especially that sevens side, the Aotearoa Māoris, the likes of Annie Brown and Susie Lowe probably helped me quite a lot with my leagues, and they were just sort of they had played in those teams as well. And I suppose I got exposure to the older women and their experience in the game, which they were really awesome at, I suppose, sharing that knowledge. And then it just made me want to, I suppose, continue to play well for them, because they were investing so much of their knowledge and their time into helping me train and learn and get better as a player, that when I actually made these teams alongside them, I wanted to play for them too, to be like, thank you for showing me this or whatever. So yeah, I think I was really lucky in those days. I was nurtured quite well by a lot of those leaders in the team. So yeah.
You made your debut for the Kiwi Ferns rugby league team in 2002. We've asked all of our guests this, and we'll ask you as well. What do you remember about your first game in the black jersey?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I remember I was named at number 3 as centre, and I think we were playing Samoa or something like that. It was a Pacifica tournament, and we're playing Samoa. And I remember saying to myself, just get involved early, you know, to blow up the nerves, because, you know, you're just so nervous. And I was like, yeah, get involved early. And so they kicked the ball off, and sure enough, they kicked it my way. And I was like, oh, yeah, here it comes. So what do? I step aside and let it bounce. And I was like, oh, shush. And so it bounced and it went out. And everyone would, like, you know, you're standing out there out on the fringe. And I was like, yeah, get involved early, kid. It's coming your way. And I just was like, oh, no. And I pulled away from it and it just let it bounce and it went out. And you got everyone saying, catch it on the full. And I was like, nah. And I just totally freaked out, I suppose. Like, oh, I think it was more, I didn't want to drop it. I was like, oh, I want to get involved early, but I don't want to catch a high ball. And I dropped it, and I was just like gutted. And I just remember looking over and seeing, I think my parents were on the sideline, and they were like, no, you know, they just dropped their head like, oh, shame. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so then, but our first set back, when we got the ball back, I was like straight away. In fact, it was my halfback at the time. She was like, you're touching the ball first, you know, just to try and get it out of me, because I, you know, new player straight away. Bummed out as, but yeah, that was my first experience with my debut. But I know I remember on my debut I got 3 tries, so then the game ended well for me, and we won that. So apart from a pretty horrific start, the game ended well for me. So yeah.
You were part of the 2003 Rugby World Cup team that beat the New Zealand Māori in the final, winning your first Rugby League World Cup. International Women's Rugby League has come a long way since then. How different was it back then? Oh,
it was so different. It was there were so many things that made it different. I mean, just starting with our uniforms, like I've watched clips of those World Cup games in 2003, and my jersey is massive, my shorts are massive, my socks, like, you know, we used to have to play with our socks up and they just keep falling down. But I think the game, the way it was, like, it was awesome that we played the New Zealand Māoris, because really New Zealand was the best in the world, and we knocked out Great Britain, and the New Zealand Māoris knocked out Australia, and so that's how we ended up meeting in the final. But it was amazing display of how strong rugby league was in New Zealand, and there was no friends out there. Although, you know, I had so many friends in that New Zealand Māori team, and girls that I'd grown up playing with, but there was no mates out there, and it was a brutal match. The score probably didn't reflect how tough it was. And that's the thing, is that your mates off the field, but on the field, you know, we knew this was a big game for both sides, and it was brutal. I think back then, you know, even in the men's game, I remember, you know, it was all those big, real physical contact, that big contact in terms of the hits and that, you know, the shoulders were right in there, the no arms was allowed, and the women's did that, you know, their fair share too. There was a lot more physicality, I think, in terms of the game. It was probably a little bit slower than what it is now, but it was a lot more brutal. I felt, you know, there was definitely no mates out on the field. So it's probably a little bit where the game's obviously transitioned in both the men's and the women's. You know, you got to have arms now. You can't just go on for those shoulder charges. I was quite tall, and I was never a very good defender. And I always found, for some reason, my opposite centre or winger were always shorter than me. So I was well known for head highs. I used to just put it down to that I was a lot taller than everyone, so it was harder for me to get low. But really, I just was a terrible tackler.
You played for the Papakura Sea Eagles Club in the Auckland Rugby League Women's Competition, and for the Melville Rugby Club and Rugby Union. Women's club rugby and league has grown so much over the course of your career. As a player, what are some of the positive changes you've seen on the women's club scene in both sports over the years?
I suppose more so now that the girls are starting at a younger age, so they're getting a lot more game understanding. You know, I think very rarely will you get a 25-year-old man saying, "Oh, I'm going to start playing rugby this year," you know, whereas it's quite common in the female game, because a lot of girls haven't grown up playing it. And so, you know, with my, say, Melville team here as a coach, every year I'm getting, you know, I was getting players that have never ever played before, and they might be 25 or 20 or, you know, even 35-year-olds saying, "Oh, I want to give rugby a go." So it's that being able to see the change in the game, and that so many more girls are playing, you know, from 5 years and then all the way through school years, that the game understanding has become a lot better. And that's, I think, where the game is now, where the shift in the game is coming, is that girls are starting the game a lot earlier, and it's actually transitioning the game to be a lot more faster. You got to be a lot more stronger. You got to be a lot more technically and tactically onto it. Whereas that's where I see the biggest change in the game, and that's for both rugby and rugby league. And then obviously just the physical demands with them being, with the game now having the opportunity to make it a career. There's a pathway there that you can do it professionally. So there's a lot more competition within all those things, which then lifts the standard of the game as well. And it's good. It's good to see. You know, when I grew up, we just played it because we loved it. We weren't getting paid, and well, we were paying to play. But now you see there's that real intent to want to represent your country, you know, win World Cups and go to Olympics, and actually have it as a full-time career or part-time career for, so rugby league or rugby 15s. That it's just lifting the game, and that the game's advanced so much more. So that's probably the biggest changes that I notice. But probably that's probably the biggest. Yeah.
You went to the 2008 Rugby League World Cup in Australia, which coincided with the Men's World Cup as well. You won your second World Cup as the Kiwi Ferns, thrashed the Aussies 34-0 in the final, and a week later the Kiwis won the Men's World Cup. Why do you think the 2008 team was so successful?
As in the men's or the women's?
The women's, yeah, for sure.
Oh, look, the women's team, if I'm honest, it was actually my favourite World Cup, because our team was just, it was probably one of the best teams that I'd been involved. I was still one of the younger ones. We had such a huge group of leaders that had been in the team for a while, so we were quite heavily experienced, but we also had a fresh bunch, I suppose, of new players that had come through, and so we just were able to blend that mix together so well. But I think it definitely came down to the culture. The culture within that team was just unbreakable, and we almost flew to Australia with a genuine belief that we were going to win it. You know, it didn't matter that we had actually previously won it 3 times, because we still had girls that were on debut. It was just that real genuine belief. We had put in the work, you know, we had enough camps, and, you know, when I say enough camps, we'd probably only had 2 or 3 leading up, but that was more than what we'd had previous years. And it was just that culture, you know. I think our leaders at the time, Louisa, she was our captain, and we just had this unbreakable belief that we were going over there to win, and we never feared any of the opposition as well. And we weren't cocky about it, though. Like, that was the thing with our culture. We were never cocky about it. We knew we were already, you know, going over there to I suppose, hold our position as number one. But we didn't go over there with that real cockiness. It was more just a genuine belief that individually we were better than our opposition player, and as a team, you know. And in that World Cup, we rotated our team quite a lot, but there was, again, you know, I was, you know, if they said to me, "Oh, you're not going to play this game," it's like, "Oh, cool, is, you know, so and so's going to play centre." You know, you just believed in your team so much, it was okay, you know. And even if we were playing, say, if we were playing the Great Britons or the Samoa or the Australia team, and that, you know, you had just this genuine belief that the whole squad that we had taken over could do the job. So it's not every year you're in a team like that, but, you know, when you've got it, it's just something clicks. And that was definitely one of my most favourite years.
So as we were doing our research on you, Honey, we couldn't really find much information between 2008 to 2012. So what was happening? Like, were you still playing league during that time as you were sort of transitioning to sevens, or what was going on between those years?
Yeah, so for some reason there seemed to be, I'm not sure what happened, but it was like we did miss a World Cup in between that 2008, and then I think our next one didn't come till 2013. And we had different international tests and things like that. But yeah, there wasn't actually any World Cup in between. And then, yeah, you're right. So that's kind of when sevens took off for us as the New Zealand Māoris, or Aotearoa sevens. And that's kind of when we started really picking up and started travelling a lot with the Māori sevens team. I think I went 4 years in a row to Hong Kong, and then we started going to Rome and doing quite a few trips, Raro. So sevens kind of, I suppose, that's where I started to really lean a bit more towards sevens. There was a lot more happening in that space, and yeah, and again, we had a really good team. A lot of our team was based around Bay of Plenty players, because our coaching staff, they were based in Bay of Plenty, and our team kind of initially started off our Bay of Plenty sevens ladies, and then we started to open out, and then they'd have trials, and then, yeah, everyone wanted to play for the New Zealand Māoris. At the time, they didn't really have, I think they had a couple of New Zealand sevens. I think they had a World Cup and a couple of other tournaments, but there wasn't a lot that the New Zealand Women's Sevens team or that New Zealand Rugby League was backing that team to go to. So then we were putting in a bid, well, can we go as the New Zealand Māoris? And then we're getting it. So then we started to, that really started to take off, really. So, yeah.
Hey, you were part of the world champion Black Ferns Sevens team at the 2013 Rugby Sevens World Cup in Moscow. This was your 3rd World Cup after winning 2 Rugby League World Cups. Then you went straight over to England to captain the Kiwi Ferns at the 2013 Rugby League World Cup. You were named player of the tournament, but unfortunately the team lost to the Aussies in the final 22-12. What was it like going from the high of the Sevens World Cup to the low of the Rugby World Cup loss in just the space of a few weeks?
Oh yeah, I think that 2013 loss with the Kiwi Ferns still for me pulls on the heartstrings. You know, it was our first loss for the World Cup, and like you say, I flew straight from Russia straight over to England between the two. So obviously I was on a high from winning the Sevens World Cup, get straight to England, and I was on a high still. You know, like we went right through to that final undefeated. And it was just in those last moments of that final, you know, that Australia took the lead from us and then ultimately won it. And I think it was tough for me because I think the first thing when we came off the field and I got interviewed, and the guy said to me, his first question to me was, "How does it feel to be the captain of the Kiwi Ferns who just lost their first World Cup?" And I was like, "Oh, thanks." I didn't think of it like that, but yeah. So I kind of probably took that loss quite personally and carried it a lot on my shoulders. There was a few errors that I'd made in that World Cup final that I was really gutted with my own personal performance. Yeah, it was tough. It was definitely a tough one, but it was definitely a learning curve for us too. You know, and we had to then obviously rebuild. And so come 2014, when we got our first shot back at Australia, you know, we were like, we weren't going to lose that game, and we were able to beat them the following year. But it's been good, I think, looking at it now, because now, you know, we're sort of swaying between the two. Like there's a genuine competition there now. New Zealand dominated for years and years, and then since 2013. Australia's, you know, started to come back, but then last year we won the nines, and so you know, the pendulum continues to swing backwards and forwards, which I think only helps the game. You know, you don't want one team that continually smashes everyone. It's not going to grow the game, and not just for between us and Australia, but for the other countries as well. You know, we want them to get better, so to see the great game grow across the world only makes it better for everyone, really.
You've worked in the disability sector and done some study in your time. How have you juggled all of this with the rugby, the league, and the whānau commitments throughout your career?
Yeah, I definitely have to credit my whānau for that one. They've been massive in supporting me, especially to raise my son. You know, especially with the Sevens. Once I was contracted full time with the Sevens, and we were traveling a lot, you know, I really relied heavily on my whānau to help me with my son. Specifically, my mum played a massive role in that, and yeah, she was looking after him a lot, but also his other nanny and koro back in Putaruru, and everyone really. I always tell my son, you've been raised by a village, so make sure you always acknowledge all those people that helped mum raise you. But it was a juggling act. I think I always looked at it, you know, I had to hold down a full-time job to be able to obviously support myself. But I never probably looked at it in the view that it was a sacrifice. For me, it was a choice. It was a choice that I was making. And every year I'd probably look at each year and try and determine, okay, what's the priority this year? Like, what's happening with Sevens? Oh, okay, it's World Cup year, so that's the priority. And then there's this test match, or whatever. There's this series happening for the Black Ferns, so I want that as a priority. And how am I going to juggle, you know, say the 3 different codes as well as work and whānau? So for me, I always looked at it as, I'm making a choice to do this. I'm not making a sacrifice. I'm making a choice, and it was tough, definitely sometimes, and that. But again, you know, for me, it was, I suppose, I always checked in what was my why, and my why is always because I love it. I love being out on the field. There's no better feeling than being out on the field. And the day, you know, that I didn't have that love for the game would be the day that then my choice would be a sacrifice. Am I actually out on this field because I want to be, or because I have to be? But yeah, until that, I suppose, feeling comes, in, I know I'm out there for the right reasons.
You became one of New Zealand's first contracted women Sevens players. This was obviously a fantastic opportunity for you to be paid playing the sport you love. but was also a massive step forward for women's rugby. What are your thoughts on equal pay, and what else needs to be done to be on an equal footing with the men?
Yeah, good question. I think in terms of equal pay, for us, there's say for the sevens, for example, there's already been a massive shift, and in fact same in the 15s and same in the rugby league as well. There is already a massive shift, so it's about acknowledging that first. And I think for us it's not really about I suppose how much, it's more about how, that fairness has to come into it. Are we putting in the same amount of effort, the same amount of time, making the same choices or sacrifices, or what does that mean, and are we getting the same results? And if we can tick all of those boxes, then we should be able to tick the financial box as well. But again, it's a progression thing. I suppose I stand my standing in it is that that we should be paid for what we're worth, and that's going to continue to grow and build as the women's space in all sports, I think, continues to evolve. It is probably scary times at the moment with this whole COVID-19 thing happening. And I suppose my biggest fear coming out of this is that it's not the women's sports that take the hit for this. Obviously, all sports are going to take a hit, but I know all the organisations, New Zealand Rugby and New Zealand Rugby League, are now going back to the drawing board and what competitions are going to happen and all of that. I don't want us to be first on the chopping block, because we've had so much momentum and made so much progression that COVID-19 shouldn't be an excuse to be like, oh, okay, well, we won't have a women's competition this year, but we'll still have a men's, because then that will be a true reflection of, equal pay, because it's not really just about equal pay. It's about ensuring that we have the same resources and all of that, and that we do have, that our game has that same value as the men's. Okay, so they can't be just chopping the women's sport just because, let's build up some revenue, and then with the men's game, and then we'll bring the women's back on. So that's probably my biggest fear, and I think I'm hopeful that that won't happen, and that all the New Zealand bodies or the organisations see that there is a genuine value in female sports, and also that that actually people want to see the females game. It's grown so much, man. The fans are huge. We get so much following now. So yeah, they've just got to have that belief system in the female game.
You made your debut for the Black Ferns 15s in 2014 and went to the Women's Rugby World Cup, where you were also named in the World 15. Unfortunately, the team finished 5th after previously winning the last 4 Rugby World Cups. What were some of the key learnings the team took away from that World Cup campaign?
Key learnings. Well, I suppose don't take any opposition lightly. Obviously, that kind of went back on points, and we had that earlier loss, I think it was to Ireland, throughout the pool games. And so obviously we went over there as the top team, and I don't think it was intentional, but we had that one loss through the pool game, and ultimately it affected us come the playoffs, because then we ended up just missing out of the top 4. So that was probably the biggest learning. But yeah, again, it was probably from that loss that you saw so many more countries start to evolve in terms of the women's rugby space, and no one probably would have ever betted to see those top 4 teams in that top 4 without New Zealand in there. And then obviously those countries have then gone back and started to really I suppose have a genuine belief that they can be the top of the world as well. And so I just think that when if we're going to continue to build our game here in New Zealand, that we have to ensure that the other countries are doing it as well. So if anything, that probably, a lot of those countries went back to their countries and then realised, actually, we're pretty decent. And then also the organisations started to pump a whole lot of resources into them. So then, again, the competition keeps getting better for us. But for us personally, we obviously had to come back and reflect quite a bit. And then I think the following year we went out and thrashed everyone in that following series that we had. So, you know, I think losses are where you get the most amount of learning and development. And so when you're constantly winning, it is easy to just kind of be like, oh, you know, we've got this game, you know, kind of thing. And I'm not saying that we went out there with that mindset, but it is kind of tucked away now and again. But like I say, like I think the losses are where you get the most growth from, not just as an individual, but as a team.
In 2017, you didn't play for the Black Ferns at the Rugby World Cup, but you played for the Kiwi Ferns at your 4th Rugby League World Cup, losing to Australia in the final. Australia has now won the last 2 Rugby League World Cups after New Zealand won the first 3 World Cups. What does New Zealand Rugby League need to do to better support the women's game here at home to remain competitive on the international stage?
Yeah, well, I think actually New Zealand Rugby League's come a long way in terms of supporting the game. I think that there still needs to be a lot of work done in the grassroots within the women's space, because really at the moment within New Zealand we've got the women's club competition, which is really strong, and they've got a lot of teams up in Auckland, but it needs to be evolved around, you know, around the rest of the country as well. So we've started a competition down here in the Waikato last year. I think they've got a small competition in Canterbury and maybe another small one in Wellington. So it's about you know, evolving that in terms of the grassroots, so that then we can get stronger at, you know, at a provincial level when we come to nationals. And then there's more players and I suppose skills and all of that to pick from come our Kiwi Ferns. So I think it's again rebuilding that, but also I know this year was going to be the first year that they were going to introduce a bit more of a provincial type competition, similar to like the Farah Palmer Cup that was going to be coming into play, and also the NRLW. We're still unsure of what's happening with that, but that's probably I've seen a lot of girls transition from other sports into rugby league now because of that incentive of the NRL, and then obviously the World Cup with Kiwi Ferns. But yeah, I think if we can continue to build that, we're attracting, just like rugby's done, you know, there's a genuine pathway there now, and leagues coming along with that as well. So it's continuing to ensure that we're building that pathway so that these 17 and 18-year-olds that might be playing, you know, rugby league and rugby sevens, they can actually you know, choose which game they prefer best and then pick a pathway. I think when I was growing up, you didn't have to pick, you could play all 3 because there was no contracts and we weren't getting paid, we were paying. So I was like, well, I'm paying for it, so I'm going to play everything I can. But now they've got to actually make a decision at quite an early age. You know, and obviously there's a few players that might pick rugby one year and then, you know, and then try their luck at rugby league the next year, depending on how it goes, which I think is fine too. You know, if they have the skills and the ability to do that, then good on them.
You talked about the NRL Women's Premiership before. In 2018, you joined the St. George Illawarra Dragons in its inaugural season. What was that experience like for you as a player, having to go over to Aussie?
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. I got to shoot over there and live over there for about 3 months. I stayed with Whanau. And so, you know, it was good. You know, I still had that connection to Whanau while I was over there, staying away from my my partner and the kids back here. But yeah, just a different experience. And I suppose growing up here with rugby league, you know, you kind of I really wanted to see what they were doing differently over there, and you know what I could maybe grab from there and help bring across here, or what it was, and just I suppose opening myself up to being coached by an Australian, or you know, or by under the Australian system and how that all worked. And I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed getting to know my teammates over there, and it was just a whole different culture. You know, that was a real learning. It was funny because it was like, even though I was one of I was the eldest in the team, I still felt very brand new because it was just a whole new culture that I had to get used to. But I love my time at St. George. You know, they really looked after me, a really good club, and just rugby league over there is so huge. It was a real eye-opener as to why, you know, rugby league is their #1 game over there. You know, just as crazy as, you know, I suppose New Zealand is over rugby. It's like that over there with rugby league, and it was just like, holy heck. So, no, I loved it over there. It was good.
In 2019, you signed to play for the New Zealand Warriors in the NRL Women's Competition, but you had to put this on hold as your mum was diagnosed with cancer and you cared for her full time. It must have been very hard, but how special was it spending quality time with your mum during this tough period?
Oh, yeah, it was amazing, actually. You know, just to, I suppose, even though I was caring for her, you know, just to get that one-on-one time with her, you know, and I was really grateful to the Warriors because right from the get-go, in fact, you know, just the timing of it was pretty much, Mum got sick the very first week that we were going into full team trainings, and the Warriors just supported me 100%, you know, and we were, I suppose, lucky in a sense that we got Mum's diagnosis very early and knew how bad it really was going to be, and with Mum's cancer, it progressed, you know, faster than I think even we realised that it was going to. But yeah, I mean, it's probably the biggest thing. You know, I knew that if I left her side and went off to training or went off to go play in the NRL or jumped in a game in that, I would have regretted that because she was changing, her illness was progressing so quickly. I just didn't want to be away from her because I became her main carer. It's like I took on a full-time nursing role. I had to know all her medications and what went with what and what timings and all of that. So it, you know, and I was really hesitant. My whānau will tell you, I was really hesitant to leave her in the care of, you know, her sisters were here and my brothers and all the rest of our whānau, like they pretty much took over my house. They were all here, but for me it was like, no, this is my responsibility. I will make sure I'm here. And there was one time, I think I was working for Sky, and my family had said, look, go and do this mahi for Sky, you know, have one night away from Mum, it'll be all right. And I was like, okay. So I jumped in the car and I only got as far as the Bombays, and then they rang me and they said, oh, look, something's happened. We've had to take her to the hospital. And man, from the Bombays to back to Waikato Hospital, I probably made it here in, I don't know, 40 minutes, you know. I was in a panic. And so after that, I never left her side. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that again. Yeah, but it was, you know, for me, it was a privilege to look after Mum. During that time was tough. It was really tough, you know, to see her suffer, I think was the worst part. But it also made me probably see a different side to my mum and how strong she was. Like I was thinking, man, if the roles were reversed here, like I'd be a mess. But she was just so strong. She probably took, if I'm honest, she took about an hour to let it process what was it, you know, in her head, what was, you know, the diagnosis was and how bad it was. And then, you know, she took about an hour of tears and things like that. And then she just said to us, oh, well, this is what's going to happen, you know, and she accepted it just like that. And I was like, what the, you know, like it took us a lot longer than that to accept it, you know. But it really opened my eyes up on how strong my mum was. And it made me want to be strong, especially while I was caring for her, which is why I went crazy training, you know. That was my only thing, I suppose, that I gave myself during that time that I was caring for my mum was that I would train. I probably wasn't eating that well, doing anything else, you know. In fact, I was barely eating because Mum couldn't eat. So I was like, I'm not interested in food. But the one thing I did for myself was train, and I trained the house down. I probably lost about 8 kgs in that time that I was caring for her over those 9 weeks. But yeah, again, it was a privilege to look after Mum.
So during that time, you married the love of your life, Hireme-Smiler. How special was your big day, especially having your mum right there by your side?
Yeah, it was. Oh, that day was probably undescribable. It's probably now, actually, in fact, that Mum's passed away, that I've actually been able to think about, you know, and reflect back on our wedding. Like, obviously, it was very different to any other wedding. We got married in the hospital, and yeah, it's funny because it's like Mum. It was Rochelle that sort of said, look, we should do this while your mum's here. And, you know, marriage was always quite important to within our family. And I thought, oh yeah, you know, because I would never want to do this day without her. And I was the only girl too, so I was like, oh, you know, and my brothers were married, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I should get married. So we done it. It was just an amazing day. It felt like it went really fast, and I felt like probably in the forefront of my mind, I still had mum there. And even like while we were standing at the altar doing our vows, I felt like I kept looking back to make sure she was okay. And so yeah, it was just a different, and like I say, so now that she's passed and I've been able to like go back and watch the videos and look at the photos, I'm like, far out, you know, we had an amazing day. And mum always knew. I think mum was probably happy because then she knew that once she passed away, that she knew that Rochelle was going to be my rock, and that's absolutely what she has been, even prior to mum being sick. And probably our whole relationship, she's been the one that's kind of I suppose been my real backbone, and even more so now with mum passing, she's had to put up with a bit, you know. Grief has a way of, man, just changing you completely, and she's just been there, just been that real silent but comforting partner that's just been like, it's okay, you know. And I think I was able to relate to Rochelle really well because she went through the exact same thing with her mum, you know, 7 or 8 years ago. So yes, it was amazing. Yeah, I definitely think, you know, that mum was just so happy to have that, to be a part of that day. So yeah.
I touching on your mum before about being tough and strong Māori woman. With her, she's done the Great Wall of China Walk, the Tongariro Crossing. Since your mum has passed, how's it driven you to do some things that you would have never done before as a tribute to your mum?
Yeah, well, I kicked off with a whole lot of motivation. I was like, right, I'm going to do these marathons and I'm going to do this and do that. But I did the Tongariro, I did the Tongariro one. That was good. And then I signed up to the China one. And that was sort of all on the go until this COVID-19 thing. But it's probably what I wanted to do with it was just put myself in her shoes and go through a different type of, I suppose, a mental and physical struggle, because I've never been a long distance person. I mean, 1 kilometre is I deem as long distance. So I just wanted to, I suppose, walk in her shoes. And China was quite a special one for me because mum always said that was probably, you know, her real life-changing one for her. Like that was huge for her, and that really broke her. So I was like, oh man, I want to walk, I want to do that and experience those things that mum did, because yeah, like you say, she, you know, I knew she was strong, but I thought, you know, am I as strong as this? It wasn't like a competition. It was more like, I want to see if I'm as strong as mum, you know, and try and conquer this wall of China thing. But yeah, I must probably thank COVID for getting me out of that, because I still don't know if I was really quite prepared. In fact, I was just talking to Rochelle this morning. If it was still happening, I'd be flying out next week for it. So I'm like, thank God. But it's on the plan, you know. I'll definitely nail it. Yeah, one day.
Awesome. Not long after your mum passed away, you guided the Kiwi Ferns to a shock 17-15 upset of Australia to win the World Cup Nines. You said you had looked at a photo of your mum before you left the team hotel and promised to bring her back the trophy. With the recent loss of your mum, what was it like preparing yourself mentally and physically leading up to that very big game?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a true story. Like I genuinely, you know, I had a photo of mum in my hotel room, and I genuinely said that to her because, again, I just had this unbreakable belief that we were actually going to win this. I didn't care that they had kicked our butts the night before. I just looked around at our team and thought, yeah, we're going to win this World Cup, you know, and it's like losing hadn't even crept into my mind. So when I actually said that to my mum's photo, I genuinely meant it, and it's like I had this full belief that, yeah, this is going to happen. I suppose I was still probably, well, obviously I was definitely grieving, but I just kind of switched it off. I'd switched off the grief and just completely switched on, right, I'm an athlete, I'm here to support my team and lead my team and win this World Cup. And so it's probably something that I've come to realize now, because when I say switched that grief off and suppressed it to focus on league and all of that, you know, and achieved what we did. So we went over there, we won the World Cup. We obviously stayed over the week later, and we had a loss there, which was a bit of a downer. And then we come back, and because I'd suppose suppressed all of that grief, and then we were kind of leading into the holidays, and obviously the holiday season was always tough when you've just lost someone. That grief kind of crept back up on me, and I actually went through a really tough time for a few months. You know, probably slipped into a fair bit of depression and grief, because I hadn't managed it very well, and I just refused to, I suppose, accept it. And I was just, you know, I isolated myself. I didn't want to leave my house, and you know, everything fell on the wayside. I wasn't training. I'd had the shoulder surgery, wasn't training, and then just started to really fall, I suppose, into like a real depression. So this COVID-19 stuff and this lockdown has been a bit of a, I suppose, been a bit of a time for me to actually sit down and figure out what's going on in my head and how have I managed all of that. And yeah, I managed to actually find these books, and that sort of self-help, self-love books that were mums, and it's actually really helped me in these past 5-6 weeks that we've been in lockdown to focus on and actually, I suppose, deal with the grief in that and go through that process, and actually I feel like I'm at a point where I'm actually accepting, you know, that mum has passed, but you know, there's so many ways that I can honour her. And it's also given me a time, obviously, I've always known that mentally, in order for me to be mentally well, I've got to be physically well too. So obviously the time that I've been able to be at home and train alongside my wife has been amazing. And I know now that I'm physically feeling a lot fitter and stronger, that it's only going to help me mentally as well. So it's been a bit of a turning point, actually, this lockdown for me.
You've been recently doing some Sky Sport commentating, and we've seen you in action, and it's refreshing to have a talented Māori woman on air. Is this something you want to pursue full-time when you finally hang up the boots?
Yeah, it is actually. I'm really starting to learn to love it and not be, I suppose, scared of it or frightened of it. I always worried, you know, anytime you're on TV, you know you're going to be opening yourself up to some criticism, and I was always used to being the player on the field, so to be directly in front of the camera and talking code is quite a different, I suppose, mindset change. And you know, when you're watching sport at home and you're like, you know, you can be quite critical. Oh, I should have did this and he should have did that. I suppose when you're in that commentator or that expert commentary kind of role, it's a bit different. You kind of have to analyze it from the point of view that you actually want to bring the viewers in who are watching it back at home. I'm lucky though, you know, Sky's given me an amazing opportunity to learn and grow within that, and I'm still really, really new to it. I definitely still see myself as a rookie, but again, have the opportunity to work alongside some people that are just really helping me out. You know, Ricky Whanau, Ken Laban, probably right at the top of the list, really supporting me and mentoring me to, I suppose, you know, to give that a good crack. And Ken always says to me, you know, you can't, you know, it all comes down to your preparation. You know, you can outperform by outperforming people in your preparation. So it's just shifting that, you know, it's exactly the same when I'm playing sport. You know, it's all about the preparation and the training that goes into it that leads to having a better performance on the field. So same thing, you know, it's the same concept as I've got to outperform in terms of my preparation, so that when I'm on these shows or, you know, doing the analysis of their games, I've got to make sure that my prep's good, which gives me confidence to be able to analyse the game. So it's been good, eh? I'm still learning a lot. I suppose the hard part is working across both, you know, working across the rugby and the rugby league. As I've worked it out, I'm like, man, that means I've got to know about 200 and something players, and I was like, holy heck. And but it's been cool, you know, especially working across Super Rugby and NRL. But I definitely have a passion for working in the women's space as well, because for me, you know, that's my way of being able to give back to a women's sport, and everything that I've gotten out of women's rugby or women's rugby league is that if I am in that commentary box or in front of the TV and the girls are playing, it's where I get to go back and really pump the girls up and promote the game. And so, yeah, I love that I'm in a position to be able to do that. So I want to, all the love and the passion that I have, you know, I can put that out on the TV to try and bring people in and be like, hey man, this sport's really, really cool. And look how amazing these athletes are. Look how amazing these young girls are coming through. So hopefully it's something that I can continue to grow in and make a career out of it maybe, yeah.
So you're currently playing rugby league, but with the Rugby World Cup being held in New Zealand next year, this is the one World Cup you haven't quite won yet. Is this on your radar, and will you be swapping codes again?
That's a good question. And I have a very solid answer for that, and that's no. I solely want to finish my career, however long that might be, within the game of rugby league. It's where I started, and it's probably, you know, and my biggest passion is rugby league. And in fact, we obviously have our Rugby League World Cup next year, so that's the ultimate goal for me. It means I'll be 40. Actually, I'm scheduled to turn 39 next week, which is a bit of a scary thought. But yeah, that the rugby league is where I want to stay, and in terms of playing, and that's what I plan to do come 2021, is it? Yeah, as represent the Kiwi Ferns in the Rugby League World Cup.
Hey,
but I'll be 100% supporting the Black Ferns. 100%. I'm going to buy tickets to all the games and make sure I'm there cheering them on.
100%. There are other successful male cross-code stars, but you've achieved just as much as them, and you've been recognised as a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to rugby league. What else needs to be done to unearth, promote, and support the next generation of women's sports stars like yourself here and around the world? And we've seen some tournaments, honey, with like the Ignite 7 players getting the most elite young female athletes involved. But what else do you think can we do?
Yeah, I think exactly that. You know, tournaments like that bring so much exposure to the game, and especially, you know, with the girls playing in that as well. And more tournaments like that, I think Sky and, you know, all the coverage that's happening now in the female space, again, continues to opens up the female game to a wider audience. But also, there needs to be work, I think, specifically in the female space around, I suppose, giving the girls confidence to tell these stories as well. Like, there's so many girls, say, in my Kiwi Ferns side, that have just these amazing backstories, but it's I suppose, putting the confidence into them to tell those stories. They're so talented and like I say, they're so amazing, and I just want those stories shared, which again draws more attention onto the women's game, and just to see the backstories of them, I think will really open the game up as well. But the girls have, you know, got to do some work around their confidence. You know, I think specifically Māori and PI girls, you know, we're raised to be humble, and you know, and but you can be humble but still tell your story. And I think when you're able to switch into that, like, your story will inspire so many people. But it's having that mindset, like, oh yeah, you know, actually I have done some pretty cool things. I do want to tell my story so that it will inspire whoever, you know. And a lot of the stories are just so relatable, but they think, oh no, you know, I'm not that important, or I'm not that interesting. Like, yeah, you're so interesting. It's definitely our space where we've still got to work on in terms of telling a lot of the girls' stories.
Just before we wrap up, looking back at your successful sporting career, who are some of the key influential figures, coaches or players, that you have learned from the most?
Oh, yeah, I've got quite a few. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have quite a few coaches and obviously players to play alongside too as growing up. I think my dad's always been a big one. He's never coached me, or obviously I've never played alongside him, but he's always backed me 100%. He's been a big probably I'd start with him, and then just looking at, I suppose, coaches. I've been the ones, I suppose, that truly and genuinely believed in me as well. Where do I start? I suppose Alan Bunting, he's the current coach at the moment. One thing he taught me about myself was around analysing myself. He was really good at, we always check back on our video footage and that. And one time I just remember he sat with me and he said to me, "Oh, watch yourself." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, cool." And then he's like, "Okay, now, honey, watch yourself when you don't have the ball." And I was like, "Oh." And so what am I doing? Hands on hips, resting, standing way too flat, and all of that. And I was like, "Oh." And he says, "So, you can do what you can do with the ball, but it's more important, what are you doing without the ball," kind of thing. So it's just when you get those little gold nuggets that help you just advance your game so much more. So Bunce was really good at that. In terms of rugby league, again, I've had a number of really amazing coaches throughout my years. Probably if I go right back to some of my first coaches back at school, I had a guy called Bunny Tehiko and Cuz Brown probably taught me a lot from back home, just some local guys back home. And also my son's Koro Kara Hodge, he taught me how to train, and really push past some of those mental, when I'm talking myself out, "Oh, I'm too tired now, I'm done." He probably taught me at a young age, how to actually push past that as well. So yeah, I've had a few in terms of players, again, just growing up, I've been able to grow up with, all the leaders throughout the 3 different codes, the Kelly Kiwis, the Annie Browns through Sevens and stuff like that. Horiana Manuel, she was our first captain for the Sevens. She was amazing for us as well. Even the likes of Linda Tinu, who actually, they're both younger than me, but they were still leaders in my eyes because, what they taught us in the game. And they're looking at the Black Ferns, Fial, she was always a good captain because she led through her actions, she's humble as, but led through her actions. And then, there's a big group of leaders through Louisa and Laura Mariu, who's one of my best mates. They were again amazing leaders that just led through their actions as well. So I've been hugely grateful to grow up in an era that I got to play alongside all these amazing athletes and try and take bits of all the good things that they shared with me and try and I suppose put that into my own way of leading, I suppose.
Awesome, honey. Hey, honey, this is the part of the podcast where we do pick up the pace challenge.
Ooh.
Yeah. So what we do is we'll give you one category and you have to name 9 answers in 10 seconds. So for example, if we said, honey, name for me 9 different types of currencies, you'd say things like the Thai baht, the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, things like that. So Araru's going to do the timing, 10 seconds. I'll do the counting. Take a deep breath, let me know, you'll get it. Just to let you know, Tyler did it last week and just missed out by 1. So cool. Competition there for you.
All right, got this.
Okay, here we go. Hireme-Smiler from Putaruru, name for me 9 North Island towns. Go.
Easy. Whakatane, Taupo, Tokoro, Putaruru, Tiro, Rotorua, Taniatua, Ruatoki.
Oh!
Hey!
Smoked it.
8.
Yeah, I think I did count 8. I think you squeezed one right at the last second. It's sort of the ticket ticks down and you just think, and that's when it comes on, isn't it? About the 8th or 7th or 8th answer. So no, you did well. Awesome.
I think
I don't
maybe
even know why I said Whakatane first.
Maybe you and Tyler need to do a tiebreaker at some point soon. Let's get to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, honey, Thanks heaps for joining us on the Pick Up the Pace podcast. Ko mutu ngā kōrero I tēnei wā. We wish you all the very best with your future endeavours. And thank you for sharing your amazing story with us all today. Ātewa.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate chatting with you, and all the best.